I was going to say, who's going to speak today? Good to be a guest speaker, I guess. Anyway, I'm really excited to be here. And this is a really great time, Memorial Day. You know Memorial Day began after the Civil War? It was really a dreadful time. And 700,000 Americans lost their lives in the Civil War. And about 2% of the population. That would be like 7 to 8 million people died here if it was today. And so it was an incredible time that these soldiers fought and they died on the battlefield. And it was the women who came forward and started putting decoration on all the graves, no matter whether they were Union soldiers or Confederate soldiers. And that's when one of the nation's first holidays began, Memorial Day. And it's to remember those people who had fallen, who died on the battlefield for freedom. So that they paid this, to honor these who laid down a costly sacrifice. And we call them on the altar of freedom. That's what it took. And you know, this song is really powerful because the Union soldiers were losing the war in the beginning. And then this woman who's an abolitionist wrote this song, Glory, Hallelujah. It became the battle hymn of the Republic. And just the words, it was like God called them to conviction because slavery was immoral. It had to end. It said that, you know, God is going to judge sifting out the hearts of men. You know, he sounded for the trumpet that should never sound retreat. It was a call to righteousness. It was called to follow Jesus. And that's what I love about this song. You know, Jesus, God's marching forward never goes backwards. Never sounds a trumpet retreat, you know. And so that's where we are right now. Memorial Day. You know, we're inspired by heroes who sacrificed their lives. You know, they laid down their lives on the battlefield. You know, they teach us to have the heart that Jesus had. That's what Jesus did. He laid down his life for us. Yeah. You know, Jesus also he calls us to lay down our lives. That's part and parcel of what a Christian is. That we lay down our lives. It is God's expectation for us. I don't know if you know that. Having a sacrificial attitude is crucial to following Jesus. And this is what we do. I remember I was at my job, there was one person was lifting up this other person. This is what I do. This is what Christians do. Sacrifice our lives. It's not the most easiest thing to do. You know, in Romans chapter 12, just not going to have to turn it, Romans 12:1, but it just talks about how crucial sacrifice is for our souls. Paul was telling them, he says, you know, in the view of God's mercy, offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is a true and proper worship. This is what God's expectation for us is. And so that we will lay down our life. Who's willing to lay down their life? That's what it's all about. That's what Memorial Day is all about. Remembering those people who did. But as Christians, we do that every day. Or we should. It's a life of sacrifice. It's a life of making ourselves a living sacrifice for God. And he is pleased with how we live our life. Let's go to Matthew chapter 16. Come on there. Come on there. It says here in verse 24, give people a chance to go there. There's some people with traditional Bibles, the analog Bibles. I like how those pages turn. Or the fingers on there. Anyway. All right, here we go. Matthew 16, verse 24. Then Jesus says to his disciples, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their lives will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me will find it. What good will it be for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? For the Son of Man is going to come in the Father's glory with his angels. And then he will reward each person according to what they have done. You know, we really learn that the most important source of power is spiritual power. Now I work with a lot of power, right? You know, power in spacecraft in space takes a lot of kilowatts of power. The thrust to throw this heavy 2-ton piece of metal into space takes a lot of power. There's all kinds of power in this world, but there's nothing more important than spiritual power. There's nothing more moving than spiritual power. And Jesus was saying, just like that song, what is more important than our soul? And he says our soul is is our spiritual selves. That's who we are. And they are the most important things that we have. Can you think of anything more important than our soul? You know, what strengthens our soul is based on the choices that we make. What do you want to save? You know, there's so much stuff in our lives, you know, that we grew up with. Our way of doing things. We like to lean on this thing. We learned a lot in all our many years. And we like to trust those things. But Jesus is talking about that. You got to lose your life to be able to save it. You know, how many guys like to... I remember I was going swimming since I was really young. How many of you guys are the type of people that just jump into the water or just dip your toe in a little bit at a time? You know, just put it in a little bit. Oh, you get to the initial shock. It's cold, and you work your way to your knees. Then you work your way to your hips. And then you work your way to your chest. And then you finally get up to the neck. And then you decide, okay, go under. Or do you just jump right in? You know, it's really torture, right? And you have to experience it every single time you dip your toe into the water. And then your knee. You got to experience that same shock. I've done it. And it's shock every single time your body, your part that wasn't under the water. You know, Jesus calls us to fully sacrifice. You know, soldiers. You know, everyone's afraid on the battlefield. I don't care how macho it is. I don't care what TV show you see. Everyone's afraid out there. You know, and there was this one soldier I know in World War II. He was always afraid. And so what he would do, he wouldn't shoot. He wouldn't shoot. He wouldn't go into battle until one of the leaders, for lack of a better word, spoke to him and says, you know what your problem is? Says you think you're trying to save yourself. You think that there's hope that you're going to get out of this thing alive. Once you realize that you're not going to get out of this battle, you know, once you realize you're already dead, then you can kick in and be a real soldier. Sometimes we want to just hold on to what we have. Yet the same thing, we see the promises of God, we see the way out, but we just want to hold on. Sometimes we just got to let it go. Sometimes we just got to just jump into the water. And not try to, one little bit at a time, try to preserve a little bit of what we had before. Our soul needs denial because we can become more like Jesus. You know, not so much focused on trying to save our life. Only then we can be what we need to be. Just a little bit of religion. Just a little bit of church. You know, what God calls us to do is to jump full on in and follow the Spirit. We're going to see this as we go on. So we choose to take up our cross. So do you choose to take your cross and follow Jesus? We will be rewarded by the choices we make. That's what God says. He says, anyone who, you know, must give up his life and follow me, let's take up his cross. He says, God will reward us. And there's reward at the end. But what are we, by what we have done? Our souls can be controlled by the flesh. Or it can be lost. Our souls can be one with the Spirit. In Romans chapter 8, verse 7, there's always a spiritual tug of war. Because, you know, our flesh is always dominating. Always want us to do things according to what it was pleasing to it. But then there's the other side, you have the Spirit. And in Romans chapter 8, it talks about this battle. In verse 6 it said, the mind governed by the flesh is death, but the mind governed by the Spirit is life and peace. The mind governed by the flesh is hostile to God. It does not submit to God's will, nor can it do so. So you have on the one hand, our flesh wants us to live a certain way, but it doesn't lead us to the Spirit. It doesn't lead us to where we need to go. It doesn't feed our soul that needs to be fed. It's selfish all the time. So we're in this tug of war. You know what happens when you see the first sign of pain? What normally happens? The first sign of trouble, what do? A lot of times we're going to full-on retreat. That's anti what that song is saying. Jesus sounds for the trumpet, never sounds retreat. But in our mind, we do. Sometimes we shrink back on our relationship with God. Sometimes we say, you know, I need to take a break from church and spirituality just to get my mind right. We start to pull back. You know, some of us, we study the Bible, and we go, you know what? You know, we just like dipping our feet just a little bit at a time. But our soul desires this food, and it requires that we, give our all in that. So as soon as the first sign of pain goes, we want to run. But we make the right choices, it will strengthen our souls. All the choices that we make. Our souls can be empowered by the Spirit, whereas our flesh leads us to death or to loss. Let's go to Luke chapter 4. 1 and 2. Verses 1 and 2. It says, Jesus, full of the Holy Spirit, left the Jordan and was led by the Spirit into the wilderness, where for 40 days he was tempted by the devil. He ate nothing during those days, and at the end of them he was hungry. You know, Jesus was led by the Spirit into the desert for 40 days, where he was tempted by starvation. He was tempted and he was starving. You know the desert is a dangerous place. Deserts, frozen tundras, they're not a good place to be, unless you say, well, what about Las Vegas? Or what about Palm? Those are oases, man-made oases. But the desert is really dangerous. Look at verse 13 and 14. When the devil had finished all this tempting, he left him until an opportune time. Jesus returned to Galilee in the power of the Spirit, and news about him spread through the whole countryside. Jesus, challenging as a desert may be, Jesus walked out of that desert with the power of the Spirit. Your desert can be a time that can give you power. Well, so how can that happen? How does being tempted and hungry give you power? We're confronted with tough choices in the desert. When we go through our hardest times, isn't that when we start to see there's some tough choices have to be made? So one of the things we need to do, we need to draw near to God. So Jesus followed the Spirit into the desert and was powered by the Spirit coming out of the desert because he chose God. You must be prepared when you go into the desert. I remember that when the first Gulf War took place, there's a storm. There were some brothers who were in the army, and I was really afraid for them. Actually, I was really, really afraid, tearful afraid, because they were saying that those soldiers, 50,000 is going to die in the first Gulf War. And so they had to prepare. And so I worked with the military. I don't know anybody in the military who experienced any combat. I haven't either. But anyway, this regiment. Combat of a different type. But those days of storm, they were really prepared. They were able to go in one day and pretty much wipe everyone out without, losing many loss. It didn't turn out to be that 50,000 because they were prepared. I work with some of the military, and so sometimes when I go on my trips, we have to go through training, just in case you might get captured or just in case something happens. And they call this training SEER training: survival, evasion, resistance, and escape. It's incredible because, the United States military, they said, we will find you. But one thing you have to do is survive. One part of the training is you have to have the will to survive. No one can help you do that time. You can stay alive, we can try to find you. And they go through all these different demonstrations about what type of food and stuff you can eat. Basically everything is edible, except for the ones on that thing that's not edible. The slimy worms, whatever you can find, you got to survive. You got to live. And so they got all this list of stuff that we have to go through. But you have to survive. And so let's go back to Luke chapter 4, verse 3. Come on, Darin. It says, the devil said to them, if you are the Son of God, tell this stone to become bread. And Jesus answered, it is written, man shall not live on bread alone. The devil led him up to a high place and showed him an instant all the kingdoms of the world. And he said to him, I will give you their authority and splendor. It has been given to me, and I can give it to anyone I want to. If you worship me, it will be all yours. Jesus answered, it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only. The devil led him to Jerusalem and said, and had him stand on the highest point of the temple. If you are the Son of God, he said, throw yourselves down from here, for it is written, he will command his angels concerning you to guard you carefully. They will lift you up in their hands, so that you will not strike your foot against a stone. Jesus answered, it is said, do not put the Lord your God to test. Hey. When the devil had finished all this tempting, he left him and went on to a more opportune time. You know, what Jesus chose to do in the desert, he chose to feed his flesh. You know, we gotta trust that the word is more important than food. You know, one of the things that's talked about in Luke chapter 4:1, Jesus was full of the Spirit when he went into the desert. Just before that, we have to be prepared. You don't know when you're going to go into a desert. You don't know when tough times will come. You have to be prepared spiritually. And what prepares us spiritually is God's word, His food. You know, we must be able to, be able to exercise that regularly. You know, to be able to be prepared, to understand what the food is. That was how Jesus was able to make it through the desert. Jesus, what is the food of God? It is to do God's will. It's more than just reading scriptures. It's setting ourselves out to sacrifice. It's setting ourselves out to not only do what it says. That's what the food of God. The food of God is to do His will. The other thing is Jesus chose to serve rather than exalt Himself. Sometimes we can get stuck into the trap of seeking to be successful in the eyes of the world. We end up having wrong expectations of success. You know, I was trying to, at my old age, trying to play football. And so I have all these grander ideas. I'm thinking that I'm like 20-something years old. You always dream about how you're going to be when the game starts. You're going to get this interception. You're going to just pick. You're going to throw it. You just do everything. I have all these grander dreams until I start playing. And I realized, once I started playing, how old I am. Not as fast as I was that I used to be. And I see all these young people running around. And I start to feel envious at times. But you know, one of the most incredible thing is the impact that it made. The fact that this old guy was out there playing. Everyone was giving me high fives and stuff like that. Saying, I see you out there. You know, they thought I was Uncle Buck. What was that guy's name? Uncle Drew. To sacrifice, I'm in pain the whole time. I need Geritol. I need whatever it takes to try to help me to get through the game. But at the same time, I'm envying the old times. I said, man, if I was 30 years younger, how many times you get stuck in that unexpected success? You know, expectations of what success is. See what other people's view of success is. See how things are working out for other people. And then you just get caught up into that. That's what can happen in the desert sometimes. You wander around finding all the wrong views. But God offers us the right view of success. Then Jesus chose to trust in God's love rather than to test God's love. That was the third thing. He chose to trust in Him. You know, it's easy to, again, lean on our own understanding. And I know what God wants us to do is to jump into the pool full force. You know, forget about that old life. Forget about all that other stuff that you might think is security. He's going to offer something even better. But sometimes the first sign of battle, we test God. And we doubt whether He's loving us, doubt whether we're doing the right thing, and so we pull back. But Jesus was able to put His trust in Him. Next thing we need to do is, there's some actions that have to follow. Remember, it's just not reading the scriptures. It's doing God's will. We need to make soul-empowering choices if we're going to get out of the desert. You know, our choices in the desert does matter. You know, and so many times we spend too much time resenting being in the desert. You know, it's hot. When can I get out of here? Who can help me? You know, stranded in the desert. Just complaining all the time. You know, one few times it gets really hot in our house, we have no heater, no air conditioning in our house. Complaints, all the things. Complaints ever change anything? You know, one time we were stuck we were on our way to Las Vegas and we got stranded in somewhere near that valley. Our car broke down. And it was 108 degrees outside and a few miles away from civilization. And we just thought we were going to die. It was one of the most scariest times. panicking. And that's what we do, right? Just start panicking. But we got to make some empowering choices to help us to get out of there. Our choices, it matters. It's time to reflect. You know, we spend too much time resenting the time there. Who enjoys being stranded in the desert? Anybody? Oh, you enjoy time being stranded. Okay. Sometimes we can be consumed with fear. You know, one of the biggest things I struggle with is feel that I might fail. Who feels that they're going to fail? Sometimes we get paralyzed by failure. You know, just like a good fighting soldier, you're probably going to die. You're going to fail. May not work out for you. And we got to be comfortable with that fact. But with our failures, we can grow. The opportunity to grow. But sometimes we don't move forward because of our failure. You ever had that fear of failure, that things aren't going to work out? We spend so much time worrying about what we don't have instead of really just trusting the Spirit and following the Spirit as Jesus did throughout the desert. You know, when will I get a job? You know, will I ever get married? Will I ever graduate from college? Will I ever be able to own a house? Whatever. We worry. And we start to seek our own way. We spend too much time instead of enjoying the experience. So I decided to get a master's degree later in life. And it was supposed to be 2 years. 5 years later. And I still needed to get an A to be able to graduate. I decided, I was just really having a hard time wanting to quit. And you know what happened? I could have enjoyed that journey. So what had to happen? I got a C. And to get to graduate, you have to have a 3.0. So I kept getting B+. I could never quite get that A. And I was like, I don't know, this fraction away from a 3.0. But anyway, I wanted to give up. So I had to take extra courses. And each course had to be harder and harder. And so I'm like, I'm never going to get out of this place. I wanted to quit. But you know what took place? All those courses that I took was really helpful. Had I graduated on time, I would not have the career I have now. Isn't that amazing? And I'm sitting here worrying about trying to get a good grade and trying to pass. I would not be here, you know, and having the incredible job I have and being able to do the things I have. So sometimes we worry so much. Let the Spirit move us, not panic. God can walk us through the desert. You know, we spend all our time and energy trying to get out of the desert. You know, but let's have a different mindset. So in Romans chapter 12, now turn it says we have to transform our thought, renew our thinking about things. God's in control. We put our trust in Him. And so we need to think about how this desert we're living in right now can give us opportunities. The opportunities to stretch our faith. Not opportunities to shrink back. You know, opportunities to make God our focus time. Because all the worry in the world is not going to change anything. And using our old way of life is not going to help us either. We need to unleash the power of the Spirit. At least allow that to happen. The power of the Spirit is available to all of us if we choose to obey. Look at Acts chapter 5. We talked about all kinds of incredible powers, but there's nothing more powerful than the Spirit. The power that was able to raise Jesus from the dead. It was an incredible amount of power. Acts chapter 5, verse 30. The God of our ancestors raised Jesus from the dead, whom you killed by hanging on the cross. God exalted him to his own right hand as Prince and Savior, that he might bring Israel to repentance and forgive their sins. We are witnesses of these things, and so is the Holy Spirit, who God has given to those who obey Him. So obedience is a very important part. God will give us His Spirit if we obey. So we need to choose to stretch our faith and strengthen our souls through the power of the Spirit. Because that was the power of the Spirit that was able to get Jesus through the desert. Who's leading you through the desert? You know, desert, you can't control when that happens sometimes. Sometimes that's the way life is. Sometimes I'm having the greatest time of my life, and then the next day I'm in the desert. Can't predict that. We got to be prepared. You got to have the will to survive. It's got to be able to have the heart. I want to work out my salvation with fear and trembling. You got to have the actions, though. It's not just good enough just to come to church or just to read the Bible or just to feel saved. There's some self-sacrificing actions that we need to do that would benefit us and help us to make it through. We need to be courageous instead of fear. Sacrificial, forgiving, trust. God puts a lot of people in our lives to help us to move forward. Just see all the great examples down here, great examples of faith. We can use this time to be able to really grow. So let's look at Luke chapter 4, verses 14 and 15. We'll close on that. Come on. The thing is this, though. Whatever we give up, God will give us power. His promises are always there, right? Trade in this old life for a brand new life. I think about that red car of mine's outside. I've been trying my best to kill that thing. I don't put oil in it. I don't wash it. And it won't die. I'm breaking all the rules in the world, but the thing just won't die. You said, why don't you just trade it in and get another one? It's got just sentimental value. I just have to wait for it to just die and maybe get another one. But who would like to trade my car for your car? Oh, you don't have a car. Okay. But to trade our thoughts and our mind, our strength for God's strength. With God's strength, we can do anything. But we got to jump into the pool and not dip in a little bit at a time. It comes with power, so that's something we can trust on. Luke chapter 4, verse 14 and 15. Jesus returned to Galilee in the power of the Spirit, and news about him spread through the whole countryside. He was teaching in the synagogues, and everyone praised him. See, when Jesus came out of the desert, he was full of power. And so many people throughout the countryside heard about him, and they were praising Jesus for his strength. That's the kind of time we want to have when we come out of the desert. But that's not automatic. Not everybody comes out of the desert full of that strength and power. Some of them come back even damaged. People fight wars, PTSD. They come back a different person. But it's a choice that we can make. We can choose to come out of there with an incredible spirit by following the Spirit and having this great power, or we can come out defeated. But it all depends on the choices that we make. Jesus chose to lay down his life for us. And that's why we're able to take communion today. Because he chose to. He asked us to choose to lay down our life. And that's all we need. That's what our soul needs. That's what we can benefit to come out of the desert by laying down our life. And as we take communion today, we can think about that great sacrifice that Jesus did. Jesus didn't call us to do anything that he didn't do. And that Jesus was the one who made the path for us to follow. And the Spirit can lead us out of any desert, any, tough time. Say, I'm not going through a hard time. But God's Spirit can guide us to an even higher place if we choose to. Let's go to God and Father.